Good afternoon, students. I am wild about science, and how about you, Mr. Joe?
I'm wild about science too, Mr. Randy.
We're in this beautiful park, and today I think I would like to talk about interdependence. That is a big word. You got any idea what it means?
Interdependence, huh?
Yeah.
I've heard of independence. What does interdependence mean, Mr. Randy?
It's the opposite of independence.
Oh, thank you.
It means that things depend on each other in order to grow and be healthy.
Wow, a lot like your fingers. Things have to mesh together and support each other.
Interdependent.
Interdependent. Great word, Mr. Randy. Mr. Randy, look at all the vegetation and growth around here. It is really interesting. So you're telling me that there's some system that these are related and they're interdependent on one and each other?
Well, yeah, Mr. Joe. When you see plants that are growing side by side, they're not the same kind of plants, and you see them, I'm going to make a sweep here and show how this forest is just full of all kinds of plants growing side by side. And whenever you see plants that are growing side by side, you may not know exactly how they're dependent upon each other, but they are in some way interdependent.
So you could say that this is kind of like a habitat for all these plants.
Habitat is a great word.
Yeah.
So Mr. Joe, I'm looking around and I'm seeing some really interesting stuff. Can you get closer here and let me show you what I found over here? These little guys right here, this plant is covering the ground, and it's got these other plants growing with it. Now, I think that is so interesting.
Hey, Mr. Randy, when I look around here, it is really beautiful. There's a lot going on. When I look down, amazingly, I find some moss here. Look at this. This is moss. Sometimes moss feeds off of dead roots and it just grows off of that. It's interdependent on some decay. And here's a small little fern growing over
Wow, that is a cool fern. Very
really
nice,
an
Mr.
interesting
Joe.
Area.
So the moss and the ferns grow together. They must like the same kind of environment or habitat. Mr. Joe, it makes me think of something. I was wondering, we've got this area here and the area over there where you were showing the moss and the ferns, and I was just wondering, does it make any sense to say that we could take some of this and put it in a jar and make our own little biosphere or interdependent habitat? Do you think we could do that?
I think so. Matter of fact, when I went to school a long time ago, they had something called a terrarium.
Oh.
And they made kind of a biosphere with plants. It was really, really interesting.
So, Mr. Joe, I have a challenge for you. Hey, and I have a challenge for you students too.
I love your challenges, Mr. Randy. What do you have for me this week?
I was just thinking that we could create a terrarium like you're talking about.
That would be awesome. I bet I could do that.
So, Mr. Joe, we have I brought a bottle. It just so happens that there's a half of a bottle in there. Do you think we could use that?
I think so. We might have to close this end off with some cellophane.
Okay, we could do that. So why don't we start with that? And what we're trying to do, Mr. Joe, is make it be as much like this environment as possible. So one thing we should do is get something we can dig with. And we brought a trowel with us. So Mr. Joe, if you'll take the trowel and dig down into this area right here. I'm going to get real close and watch you do it. Dig down to this area right here and see if you can dig up. Oh, look what Mr. Joe is doing. He's making a circle. So his jar is a circle, and he's making a circle, and he's digging down. I'm going to get really close, Mr. Joe, because I want to see what's under it. Now let's see. Okay. Wow, do you see any bugs or any worms or anything?
It's good black soil though, Mr. Randy.
I'm going to look down in here. So what did you do? Oh, look at what you did. Put it right there. Well, that looks great, Mr. Joe.
Let's hope that it works.
Now, what's going to happen is we got to close this end off, right? This end
That's
right
correct.
here. So how do we do that? We could use cellophane and a rubber band maybe, okay?
That would be a good process.
I think we could do that. But I'm really interested in what we left behind. Let's see if we can get real close here and see. Do you see any worms or anything? So, Mr. Joe, do you think there's anything in our bottle that is alive besides the plants that are up on top? Do you think there's anything in that soil that's alive?
I bet there is.
I bet there is too. We may not be able to see it. It may be very, very small. But there may be little worms in there. There are really tiny little worms in almost all soil. They're called nematodes, just in case anybody wants to know. But they're so small you really just can't see them. But they're there, thousands and thousands of these little worms. So kids, I'm just going to use a box, a plastic box that I have from home. Sometimes at the grocery store, we buy baby spinach in these big plastic containers. And it just occurred to me that these make great places to collect specimens, or in this particular case, maybe make a terrarium. So we're going to use this as our terrarium. It's kind of big. We're going to come over here and to this moss, I'm going to dig up some dirt to put in there. Just some dirt right here. I want to make sure there's dirt in my terrarium at the bottom. But then, after I get a little bit in there, then I want to, so I've got a layer of dirt, and now this moss just comes up. Isn't this cool? It just comes up in little pieces like this, and how beautiful is this moss? I'm just going to layer it down like this. I'm going to pick up some more. It just comes up in sheets like this. I think moss is so cool. We're going to put some more right there, and then I'll pick up some more right here. More moss. And so once I'm finished, I'll use my trowel to get a little bit bigger piece this time. When I'm finished, it will grow back. The moss that's here will make new moss. So we've got that. So we've got this to start the bottom of our terrarium. Moss grows really well, and I thought maybe we could put one of these ferns in here. This fern, let me get down real deep, because I don't know how far ferns go into the ground, but I want to get all the roots I can. So I'm going to get this out, get a lot of the trash away from it. Now, we have this fern. It's got 3 pieces to it. It looks great. Let's hope that it enjoys being in a terrarium. So there we go. I've got this. I'm going to take some more dirt and pack it in like that. Some more dirt, maybe a little bit more dirt. And I've made a terrarium. Now, to make your terrarium healthy, it needs to have some water in it. So I'm going to pour some water on it, and not to drown it, but just enough to get it wet. And then I'm going to close the lid. Close the lid so that nothing can get in. No water, no air maybe. And we have a terrarium.
Wow, that looks great, Mr. Andy.
Wow, Mr. Randy, I think we built like 3 terrariums. Each one's very different. On this one, we had to cut a bottle. And if you need to cut a bottle, you need to get your parents involved to make sure it's safe. You know, safety's paramount. Each terrarium is a little different, and they all need water. Some need a lot of sunshine, when we have moss like this one that Mr. Randy made, this probably needs more shade. So when you're digging up, look at what you have and what the habitat it's coming from, because you want to kind of duplicate where it's coming from. These plants we found in complete sunshine. So when I leave them out, I can put them in complete sunshine. So, you know, when you're out hunting for your potential plants for your terrarium, have fun, be safe, and note the whole habitat, because you kind of want to duplicate that.